So, you're looking for that next generation experiences when it comes to playing video games. Or maybe you want to find that next mainline title, the franchise you played when you were a kid, something that you know will be worth your money. And yet, by the end of that experience, you feel that emptiness inside you. Why is that? Why is it that it didn't scratch that itch? Well, I have felt that too. Oh, yes, many, many times. And at first, I thought it was a sense of burnout or the sense of wonder dying inside me. But no, I found the answer. It's simply because AAA games have become similar, much more similar each year. It's like each time I boot up the new Assassin's Creed or the new Final Fantasy, it just feels repetitive, man. It seems like every game also has loot box systems, stuff to just make money off of us. We're no longer getting the innovation we once had. But it doesn't have to be that way. And yes, there is a solution. And yes, it is risky. But there it's definitely worth your investment and time, and there are statistics and trends to prove it. First, the solution is simple. Putting some faith into indie games titles. These indie games are made by small creators and are created through hard work, sweat, and tears. Some are even created through crowdfunding. Indie games have been the forefront of innovation since the beginning of video game creation. Yet, for the longest time, it has been seen as a niche genre, one that could always underdeliver. At least that's how it has been seen. But recently, this past decade, it has become more and more popular. And there is a clear reason as to why. Well, a clear reason. I say a clear reason, but it's kind of a combination of two reasons. First, number one, it's because how outstandingly different they are. And number two, how easier it is for creators to self-publish their games. You see, AAA titles always have one thing that never changes, and that's having to ensure that they make twice as much profit or more from their games in return. How can you expect innovation from that? You can't. And that's why the games have been feeling repetitive. They play too safe with their storytelling and gameplay mechanics. You can't deviate too far off the path, or you might risk losing money. Or is it? Well, indie game creation has proven time and time again that by small indie creators risking their dreams and finances to get audiences to play their games, that there is a success to be had. To be honest, the only real risk comes to the indie game creator themselves. There is a documentary called Indie Game the Movie that follows a set of indie game developers in their effort to create an insightful creative storytelling and gameplay mechanics, all while risking their project always failing, risking their finances, their dreams, something that AAA titles would never do unless it was guaranteed that the general wide audiences would love it. But that's just the risk that indie game titles take each time. They're meant to seek out a certain audience, create new communities, something that is just creating innovation. All right, say that you aren't convinced yet. Maybe the risk is still too high for you to give indie games a try. After all, they're meant to seek out a certain audience, right? But let me tell you, just because indie game titles are meant for certain audiences doesn't mean that they exclude all individuals. There are countless games, and I can guarantee you that there's at least a couple of indie games that will fit your desired experiences. After all, their innovation is pretty much endless. And here is how I can prove this to you. In our current decade, each year and from 2017 onwards, indie games have been present at the nomination at the yearly Game Awards. And recently, these past 4 years, have been put up for a nomination for Game of the Year. So much so that they're starting to take notice by large companies such as Nintendo, PlayStation, and Xbox, where those companies are setting up their own indie directs to support these small indie game creators because they have acknowledged that these games have great potential. And so, how far do indie games vary? Well, it's a category that can have its own categories. Let me give you an example of what I mean. One of the most successful indie game titles is called Stardew Valley. And it is something that created innovation in farming sims because it created a mixture of more about community building and farming. It revolutionized storytelling by allowing you to build a community and you get to decide how you befriend the townspeople. And there's a lot of townspeople to meet, and I can guarantee you, at least some of them will fit your fancy. Then there's a game Celeste. It's an 8-bit platformer that has a beautiful story that took risks, and one that could have excluded a large part of the audience. And this is because it is a story about mental illness. The main character, Madeline, has reoccurring panic attacks throughout the game. She reveals slowly that her past trauma gets her frightened easily when situations around her get too complex. Madeline's inner demon is personified into an actual person throughout her journey, and we get to see how she thinks herself about as a failure. We get to see how she discovers how to control her thoughts and gain control over her mental health through her journey on top of Celeste Mountain. And although it could have had the chance to exclude a large audience, the majority fact is that the audience loved it and its representation about mental illness, something that AAA games wouldn't risk involving their characters. Then, for my final example, I'd like to introduce you to Hades, which was 2020's Game of the Year winner. Sorry, it says 2021 there. So you know it was definitely good because it won Game of the Year. Hades is a roguelike adventure that utilizes the story of Greek mythology gods. It's a game about a broken family where you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, who keeps the secret on why you can't leave the underworld to Olympus, and keeps Zagreus in the dark about his birth mother. Zagreus' family assists him to escape to Olympus by giving him the power he gets from multiple Greek gods such as Zeus, Hermes, Poseidon, Athena, etc. Now, from all these examples, do any of them feel the same? No. The only real similarity is that they're all indie games and want to have innovational storytelling and gameplay mechanics. This innovation is only going to increase, with small indie game creators now being able to self-publish their games. And back then, they weren't able to do that. They had to beg and fight hand in hand to get large companies to notice them to present their games in their stores. Now with storefronts like Steam, it's easier to self-publish their games and get greenlit. And we're seeing innovation even this year. Heck, there has been another Game of the Year nominee, and it's for a game called Stray. A game where you play as a cat in a post-apocalyptic future where there are no humans, just sentient robots. And you get to explore and find out how it got to such a meek future as a cat. And it has a good chance of winning Game of the Year, because the reviews in Steam say it's overwhelmingly positive. And I played it myself. It's good. Now, if I haven't convinced you enough, let me give you one of the best reasons why you should play indie games. Well, mainly because they're extremely cheaper compared to AAA games. In fact, the majority of indie games go for less than $25. And I'm talking about the good ones, such as Hades, Celeste, Stardew Valley, and Stray. Meanwhile, AAA games charge $60 for each copy. And that's not the worst part. Reputable sources such as PlayStation and Xbox, and Kotaku Studios have brought forth news that the next generation consoles are gonna get a bumped up price in their games. I'm talking $70, folks. Imagine paying near $100 per game. That's just outrageous. There has never been a better time to jump into the games experience that indie games can bring you. All I really have to ask now is, what are you waiting for?